All right. Welcome to the Default Profitable Podcast. You're listening to the next episode. And today we're going to focus on what it takes to start, run, and grow a creative business. We'll be talking about some successes, failures, and real stories from a business owner. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Andrew Curtis. Andrew, welcome to the show.
How are you today?
I'm good. How you doing?
I am glorious, of course.
So we kind of sort of know each other from launch. We've been around for a while, but why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes, introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll do 2 or 3 minutes to introduce your business.
Sure, thank you. My name's Andrew Curtis. I started and still operate Fuel VM. It is a brand and digital marketing creative shop based out of Indianapolis. My background was in traditional graphic design, but got absolutely obsessed with brand strategy, understanding audiences. Why do people select one product or one company versus another? And really developed Fuel VM into an outsourced marketing department, really going full boat from brand strategy to brand creative, design, video, social media, email, web, but having just as much technical acumen as we do creative acumen. So, and being really pragmatic about results. So there.
So what was it in 2003 that made you sit up one day and go, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own?
So here's one you're never going to hear. My wife was actually pregnant with our first child. She was 8 months pregnant when I decided to leave and start my company. That was an interesting conversation. But choosing choosing actively to leave gainful employment to open the company, yeah, that was kind of interesting. The why was kind of more fascinating because as a traditional graphic designer at the time, I used to just hate the mangling of strategy from execution because of people who were talking from the company and the decision maker, not really understanding the nuance about what was going to be result driven or not. So if I wasn't in the room, you would get these, Frankenstein's monster results from things that the quote unquote account people didn't really understand in terms of nuance. So it was always about control. It was never about money. It was just about controlling the product.
So it's funny. Obviously, I spend a lot of time with salespeople, and I always laugh because the salespeople are always like, man, if I just had that one correct leave behind thing, I would have made the sale. And I'm like, dude, it's never the handout that's the problem.
It is one of the touch points. It is one of the bricks in the wall of credibility. And but you are absolutely correct. But that's also why I get annoyed about companies that will hire such and such of sales and marketing. I'm like, wait a minute. You have those two industries or those two specialties keep score completely differently. So I always think it's hilarious when companies like, oh, it's real easy. Hey, I'm going to hire one person. No, what you did was hire one department to just oversee the other. It is the rare person that really understands both sides of that coin.
So we haven't really had this conversation on this podcast, but I'd love to see if you have kind of an answer for it. But what's the difference between brand strategy and tactical execution? So there's really 3 parts to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Brand is real simple. It's really an emotional response. It's what they think about you. And the problem is most companies think brand and like, oh, here's our logo, or they like to throw around the term brand, but it's really the emotional response. Your brand is going to extend from your creative and your website and your marketing materials all the way into, hey, if you have a physical space, like I'm working with a retail company, and what's the music, what's the aromas that all support it, because let's go back a step, you have a brand strategy in place to activate the audience that you want the most. Most of the problem when brand is not a good connector to your audience, it's because the owner of the company thinks that they are the audience. you really have to go, hey, who's the actual buyer? What's that buyer's journey? And you would know this well from the sales perspective and saying, what are those, it's more of a relay race than anything. Brand is the overall, hey, what do they think about you? And then the marketing pieces of the individual steps in that buyer's journey.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I have a lot of marketing clients and talk to a lot of marketing people, and my wife's a marketer. And when people talk about strategy, they think that first they have to have a brand, then they have to have a strategy. And I'm like, no, it's actually exactly opposite. Like, your
1000.
strategy is who you're aiming at and why you're aiming at them, and it's what you want them to think and feel. And then tactically you do a bunch of stuff, and then you look at what did you produce, and then you decide whether or not you need to change strategy and tactic.
Yeah, it's, I always, try to explain to people, like, um, if you have a good strategy in place, that's your cheat code. Most companies are like, "Hey, I don't wanna pay for brand strategy."
Right.
Oh, because I got it. I know who I wanna be when I grow up. I'm like, and 9 times out of 10, I always think that's kinda cute because um, typically the small business or the emerging business, they have, their charismatic leader, their visionary leader. But the visionary leader typically is focused on the operations and the construction of their business, not necessarily their audience. And
Right.
that, you have to just absolutely fall in love with being obsessive about understanding your audience, not what you want, not what you as business leader think your audience wants. You have to know.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's so funny because even from the most basic thing, I laugh. A majority of my clients don't have job descriptions for positions,
Yeah.
and they're going to hire. And I actually have a client that uses the phrase "rock star salesperson," and I'm like, "That's fantastic. Could you describe what that means?" And they're like, "Oh, we just want somebody really good." I'm like, "Oh,
Bringing it.
but you got it. You nailed it. That's it." So, all right. So, let's talk about when you started the business. Right? So
Right.
go back 20, 22, 23 years, and what are some of the things? I mean, obviously you had a graphic design background, you had worked in the marketing world, you kind of knew what you were looking for, you had decided all that. But what are some of the things that it surprised you that you didn't know about running a business back then?
Uh, Kinda everything. Look, man, I went to art school. Stop for a minute and kinda go, how in the world do you take somebody from visual communications, went to art school to turn it into really understanding how to operate a business? I remember buying all the books and, all the freelancer books, and what was funny was I finally got to a point where I was like, you know what? If it was that easy to just have a textbook, then everybody would be running it and they would figure it out. Like, I still remember my wife really saying, "Hey, do you have a business plan?" I was like, "My plan's to be open next month." So all of a sudden, the big lesson that I had to learn very quickly was, instead of thinking as a small business, instead of thinking about these grandiose plans, you're like, hey, let's think in 30-day increments. Did I make enough money this month to be able to cash flow next month? Um, I never, I never took on debt. I made sure that I was bootstrapping every single month in detail as it went along. So the big lesson for me was to understand cash flow very quickly. Instead of thinking about it as, hey, there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I was thinking about it from a, how can I stay consistent, as owning a services industry, or a services company, to be able to be solvent from day one. And that's what was always interesting. It actually held me back a little bit because I didn't hire full-time employees. I used contractors for so long because I was just so afraid of having that, let me be stereotypical, the scarcity mindset versus the abundant mindset. And that was a huge lesson, was to go, I have to be able to take that leap of faith, but to do it very intelligently and go, hey, if I hire somebody, guess what, I have twice as many hours to work with. and
Right.
and not realizing what power was in that, and it took me a long time to get there.
Well, it's interesting that, and I'll just call it financial literacy is the thing that you kinda put your finger on because that has been well, this is 130 some episodes in, and that's been in more than half, probably closer to 3
Wow.
quarters of the business owners, including the one that I enjoyed the most having a conversation with was Pete the Planner, who's a
Yeah,
financial expert and said,
right.
"What I didn't realize was business math and personal financial math are totally different things."
1000%. As I have become a senior statesman on the in the business community, if I may.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have evolved into doing some business coaching with some younger business owners. And one of the first things I do is say, go deal with your economics first. Quit getting a starry eyed idea. Yes, there's nothing wrong with being visionary. Yes, there's nothing wrong with those huge ideas. But today's issue is how do I go manage the economics of my company, and how do I cash flow that? I still see business owners that treat their companies like they're ATMs. Like, hey, I made $100 this month, so I'm going to pay myself $100. Like to
Yeah.
me, that's horrifying to hear. I'm like, whoa, 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 that isn't setting you up for success. That's not setting you up for sustainability. That's putting money in the owner's pocket instead of actually, treating the engine that created that money with respect. And that's a tough lesson.
Yeah. So you mentioned that well, you mentioned your wife was 8 months pregnant. I can't even imagine the joy that that conversation was. Um, but you mentioned she asked you if you had a business plan. So that's one thing that's come through and business owners consistently say before you start a business, you should have a business plan, you should have savings, and you should have a clear understanding of the market that you're going to sell into. So if you had to look at those 3 things, how how were you on planning, savings, and an understanding of your market?
It's interesting because usually the advice I give to people that want to have a successful business is to almost put their personal finances to the side. What they really have to do is understand their audience. They have to understand their market. The best advice I ever heard was in the business world: fall in love with a problem, not your solution.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, if you understand your audience so much more, what does your audience crave before they even know it? That's going to be a much better barometer of whether you're going to be successful as a business or not. There's nothing wrong with business plans. I'm not here to be the guy to say just go out and go do it, guns a blazing. Um, but but what happens is the piece that most businesses miss is that they don't learn to focus on their audience and their needs. They're so interested in, hey, I build widgets. How can I get people to buy more widgets? I'm like, you got it all backward. How can you find out what your audience wants? Build what they want, build what they need, or reposition what you have for what they need. It kills me that in 2025, and we're so smart, how many businesses still don't think that way? It's unconscionable to me.
Well, it's so the follow-up to that is that of all the people that said, "Hey, you should have a plan, you should understand your market, and you should have savings," all of them say, "And I had none of those." Right? I had a
Yeah,
plan that was at best 20% accurate. I didn't have enough savings because I wasn't planning to start at the time that I started, and I thought I was gonna sell this to my market, but I actually ended up selling something totally different, and
yeah.
and I think that's the one of the things that creates a barrier to starting a business because people think that, "Oh my god, I don't know what I'm gonna sell," and really it's what you said is, are you in love with finding problems? Are you in love with not, "Hey, I'm gonna design a solution to a problem before anybody gives me money," but are you comfortable with the idea that I'm gonna think this through, and when I'm wrong, I'm gonna think it through again?
You yeah, so when I yeah, my wife was 8 months pregnant. I had cash flow to basically, be open for about 90 days. And just in terms of dollars and cents that were in my pocket, and it was, hey, I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, then I'll go get a job, right? That was the get a job was the backup. And I'm like, now I look at that as like that was so emotionally ridiculous. Like, who's going to start a business and think it's going to work in 90 days? and not have that planning in place. So I am the luckiest one. It is ridiculous. I can't believe it worked, looking backward. but but what I did, my industry and what I do with, creative and technical marketing solutions is look at problems, and instead of thinking about selling solutions, it's to analyze, what is the market missing? So in a lot of ways, my job helped me a ton, but it was also the approach to it. Instead of just going, "Hey, I'm going to go design pretty things," there's nothing wrong with that. But what it doesn't do is to really measure efficacy, and that was really where that brand strategy discussion comes. Where is your audience? Where are they in the process? What do they absolutely need and crave? And if you can find an unmet need in the market, you are going to print money. I'm absolutely convinced.
So there's two things I want to ask you about, but the second one is when you said unmet need.
Mhm.
Do do you really think that there are completely unmet needs in the market, or are you really looking for that incremental space?
I would argue it's usually something that's incremental. It's not typically, disruptive. Like, all right, let's go get in the time machine. Netflix, 20 years ago was a barely hanging on DVD rental company. They were doing a horrifying job of realizing how they could be profitable. They're on the brink of death. And then they did something amazing. They asked their customers what they wanted. How? How just incredible that they would actually ask their customers what they wanted. So all of a sudden, the streaming and distributed video concepts and getting away from a physical product to a digital product. And there's a reason. I'm pretty sure they're like the largest entertainment company in the world now. Um,
Yes.
because they looked at their audience. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about the physical, how much mailers cost and the postage. It was that they just looked at what their audience wanted. And guess what? People gravitated toward it. So that's a macro example, but again, they didn't reinvent the movie industry or the TV content industry. They reinvented their relationship with their customers. That's cool. That's where, again, you don't even have to see tons of advertising about Netflix. It's almost humorous to me how little, Netflix has to engage in advertising at some sort of macro level. Hey, they'll talk about their individual shows, but that's
Yeah.
a pocket of that audience. But really, their big vertex moment was understanding what their market, and the market didn't even know they wanted it yet, but
No.
because they really engaged and actually did the homework. I mean, what a case study for success. I mean, so when that's the incremental piece, but it was monumental in the industry.
Well, that's those little niche kind of things are generally huge profit opportunities
Yeah.
because there is, as much as we want to kid ourselves, there are no small niches in the in the US economy. They're all ginormous.
Yeah. One of our clients is a landscape, who I just adore. He's a lawn and landscape, softscape company, and it isn't that he reinvented landscaping or mulch. What he did was do a great job of just being incredible in his communication. It's not that he had to be completely new in the industry. It's that he was just aggressive in his communication. I mean, and that's where the truly the business development and the sale, it was that level of communication with the customers that was his differentiating aspect. So guess what? That becomes a big part of their brand strategy, and that becomes the marketing tools that come along with it. So that's where the biz dev side was the differentiator for him.
Yeah. Um, so, you've been around 23 years. If 2025 Andrew
Yeah, yeah.
could go back to 2003 Andrew, the night before you open up officially and say, "Hey, listen, man, it all works out. It'll all be fine. But tomorrow when you start your business, here's the one thing you need to focus on." What's the thing that you would focus on first?
Um, the so here's a story. I've told people this personally. It's the first time I've ever told it publicly. Um, So when I decided to leave my job, I'd actually started it with a partner. the partnership didn't go very well. So it was about a year into it that I was actually by myself. And I remember having this enormous amount of fear, getting down, laying on the floor, doing the crying thing, going, oh, what am I going to do now that I have a, year-old baby? And just realizing, look, get up. You know what? Nobody is going to go cry for you. Nobody's going to cry for your business. It is on you. Just realize you got to start that inertia. Just start that momentum. Get up and put one foot in front of the other. But what's hilarious is I run into business owners all the time, and especially young ones, and they're like, "Well, I'm trying to get a consulting shingle, but I'm also interviewing." Uh-uh. Choose a path. Because if you're trying to do both, what you're doing is sucking at both. Go choose the one that you're going to be good at because you only have enough time and energy and brain power to really be good at one of them. And that, as much as anything, was kind of my wake up call to go, look, I'm either going to be successful or I'm not, and I'm going to go all in or I'm not. And it does work. The planning and the mechanics, the MBAization of the business, of the small business, it's not that one thing is more important than another. I was smart and hired somebody to kind of handle the operations and economics of my company several years ago, and that has freed me up to go do what I'm good at and what I like. And I wish I had done that much earlier. But things worked out. It'll be all right.
Well, and it's funny because there is that split between I'm trying to go into business for myself and I'm trying to interview, but in your show notes that you sent over to me, the word that you used was unemployable,
Yes.
which rhymes with which rhymes with every small business owner's mindset, because who would want somebody that is, like, gonna do things their own way, that's strong-willed, that doesn't accept anything that you say, that just wants to argue about stuff? I mean, that's every small business owner, but it's also a terrible employee.
And frankly, that's what's always been interesting. Like when I'm going to hire people, I actually like people that tried to start a business and failed. And the reason I love that is that they have the mindset of, "Hey, I want to go do this," but then they appreciate when it does work. So I actually kinda like people that have had to, skin up their knees and had to lick their wounds and move on. But for me, selfishly, it was funny, I forgot about that word, unemployable. I just got to a point where I'm like, the worst thing that ever happened to me in my professional life is that this worked. So now I'm just insufferable. Uh, But it's
Yes.
because you have to keep putting pelts on the wall, and if I can prove that I've done it, then we go, "Hey," because typically when I'm dealing with a client, this is their 1st or 2nd rodeo,
Yes.
and I'm like, "That's cool. I've now done this like 1,000 times, and my job is to help you. My job isn't to just, listen quietly. It's truly to help you."
Yeah, well, to help you and also give you a great brochure because that's what you've hired me for, right?
It's it's funny because even that has evolved. Like I did a tour at a print facility, fantastic Priority Press, Diversity Press down here, and I was just like almost in love because I hadn't been around the smell of ink and the production side in years. Because everything is so digital now, video and
Yeah.
organic ads and blah blah blah. But
Alright. Well, any other bits of wisdom that you would throw at somebody who's aspiring or a new business owner?
um, I would say go read 2 books. Read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell.
Or
Incredible, incredible book. It's
if you don't like the way the cover looks, don't bother reading that one.
like it's fantastic because um it's an anecdotal analysis of first impressions,
Yes.
and you don't realize how powerful that is, not just in my industry, but just any industry. And
Yes.
you're like, wow, there are people out there that can taste the differences between certain types of wheat. And you're like, wow, how would they have done that? How did they learn that? How did they become experts in that? That was always been fascinating to me.
Yes.
The latest one has been a book called Wide Lens. A friend of mine had recommended to me, and it's about innovation adoption. But it was written about case studies from the 80s and 90s about how I don't care how great your business is, but if you need 5 or 6 other businesses to line up or industries to line up, it doesn't matter how great your solution is. You have to understand how to manage the risk with each one of those red lights or green lights. Because if one of those 5 is a red light, you're dead. Doesn't matter how great and how much everybody else wants it. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's as good as I got for advice.
No problem. Those are good things. And I'll tell you, if you had just stopped by before you start a business, read 2 books, I wouldn't even care if they're comic books as long as the business owner was willing to admit they might need to learn something.
Oh my gosh, constantly. The blogs and the business books that I still try to enter into my mind, even this far in, and I still am constantly reinventing how we might be able to serve clients. And if the minute that you stop and think you know everything as an owner, just quit because you don't.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, that's a quick 25 minutes there.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
before we wrap up, I want to make sure everybody understands you can find more information about Andrew and his business over in the show notes at defaultprofitable.com. And if you're listening, there's 3 ways you can help us. Leave a review, hit subscribe, or share an episode. Andrew, thanks for being a guest.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
No problem. And for our listeners, we'll be back next week with another episode of Default Profitable. Until then, stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.